You want to own a golf course. Your name on the sign out front, a clubhouse bar where everybody knows you, Sunday foursomes with your buddies, maybe a wedding venue on the side, a little empire of green fairways with your last name on the scorecard. In 1999, a group that included Clint Eastwood and Arnold Palmer bought Pebble Beach for $820 million. Here's the problem. Golf courses are one of the fastest ways in America to turn a fortune into a much smaller one. A golf course isn't really a business. It's 150 acres of grass that needs to be watered, mowed, and fertilized every day, whether a single person plays on it or not. So, let's start with what you're actually buying, because golf course isn't one thing. It's at least 3 completely different businesses wearing the same green jacket. There's the municipal course, owned by a city or county, usually breaking even at best, kept alive mostly because closing it is politically ugly. There are roughly 16,000 golf facilities in the United States, and a real chunk of them are municipal, losing a little money every single year and getting patched up out of a park's budget. Then there's the daily fee course, a straightforward business selling tee times to strangers for cash, competing on price and condition like any other service business. And then there's the private member club, which doesn't really sell golf at all. It sells belonging, funded by initiation fees that can run from $50,000 to well over $500,000 at the top end. There's also a fourth, quieter category, the semi-private club, which sells memberships to some and daily tee times to the public to fill the gaps, a hybrid that exists mostly because pure private clubs are harder to keep solvent than people assume. A man named Robert Dedman built an entire empire on the private club model back in 1957, inventing something called the food and beverage minimum, the rule that you owe the club money every single month whether you actually eat there or not. We'll come back to him. This script is really about the daily fee course and the private club, because that's where almost every real buyer ends up. And increasingly, it's about the real estate wrapped around both of them, because that is where the actual profit tends to hide. Getting in the door is not cheap. An 18-hole course needs somewhere between 100 and 150 acres of usable land, and that's before you've touched a blade of grass. Building a new daily fee course from raw land typically runs $8 to $15 million, once you account for grading, drainage, and irrigation infrastructure. Go upscale, hire a name-brand designer like Pete Dye or Tom Fazio, and resort-level courses have run $20 to $50 million before a single membership is ever sold. Irrigation alone, the underground pipe network that waters the whole property, can eat $2 to $4 million of that on a large 18-hole layout. Shaping just the greens and bunkers, the part of construction people actually picture, can run several $100,000 per hole, because a proper putting green isn't just dirt, it's layered sand, gravel, and drainage pipe built to exact specifications, so it doesn't flood in a storm. Cart paths alone, the paved trails winding around the whole property, can add another $1 to $2 million for a full 18 holes. The clubhouse itself, with a kitchen, a pro shop, locker rooms, and banquet space, can add another $5 to $15 million on top, depending on how much banquet business you're planning to chase. Maintenance equipment alone, the fleet of mowers, aerators, and sprayers needed to keep the turf alive, can run $500,000 to $1 million just to outfit a single course, and most of that fleet needs replacing on a rolling basis every 5 to 7 years. And here's what nobody tells you at closing. If you're buying an existing course instead of building one, you're not just buying grass and buildings. At a member equity club, you are often inheriting a legal obligation to refund departing members their original deposit, sometimes $30,000 or $60,000 each, owed the moment they resign or pass away. Multiply that by a membership roster of 300 or 400 people, and you've just signed up for a liability that can run into 8 figures, one that never once shows up when you're walking the fairways on the day you sign the papers. Now, how does the thing actually make money? Layer 1 is greens fees, what a stranger pays just to walk on and play, anywhere from $40 at a public course to over $600 at Pebble Beach today. Layer 2 is the cart. Cart and equipment rental sounds small, but at a busy public course, it can add several $100,000 a year in almost pure profit because the carts are already paid off. Layer 3 is membership dues, the private club's real engine, where 200 members paying $800 a month generates close to $2 million a year before a single greens fee is even collected. Layer 4 is food, beverage, and banquets, weddings, corporate outings, the clubhouse bar, and at a lot of clubs, this single layer out-earns the golf operation itself. Layer 5 is the pro shop, selling clubs, shoes, and logo merchandise at a healthy markup, which sounds minor until you realize it can clear $100,000 a year at a busy club with almost no extra labor cost. Layer 6 is instruction, a resident golf pro giving private lessons at anywhere from $75 to $200 an hour, with the club typically keeping a cut of every single one. Layer 7 is the driving range, bucket sales that look trivial one at a time, but can add $50,000 to $100,000 a year at a course near a dense suburb full of people trying to fix their swing. Layer 8 is hosting outside tournaments, corporate scrambles, and charity events that rent the entire course for a day, often for $5,000 to $15,000 per event, which is one of the few revenue lines that cost almost nothing extra to deliver. Layer 9, the one almost nobody thinks about, is the land itself doing something other than being a golf course. Plenty of courses lease out corners of their acreage for cell towers, which can quietly bring in $20,000 to $50,000 a year per tower for doing absolutely nothing except letting the antenna sit there. It's a strange thing to realize that the least golf-related acre on the property might be the most reliably profitable one. But here's the layer almost nobody accounts for going in. If the course sits inside a housing development, the golf course itself might be designed to lose money on purpose, because every lot that borders the fairway sells for a premium of 15, 20, sometimes 50% over an identical lot across the street. The course isn't the product. It's the marketing budget for the houses around it, and the developer knew that before you ever showed up to buy it. Which brings us to what it actually costs to keep the lights on. A modestly sized public course typically spends $1 to $1.5 million a year just on maintenance, mowing, fertilizer, pesticide, and a golf course superintendent, who is, functionally, running a small farm. A high-end private club can spend $3 to $5 million a year maintaining the same acreage to a much higher standard. Payroll eats a huge share of that, with a full 18-hole operation often carrying 30 to 80 employees between grounds crew, kitchen, and the pro shop, most of them seasonal and almost none of them cheap to insure. Property and liability insurance alone can run $50,000 to $150,000 a year, partly because a golf course is, legally speaking, an open invitation for a stray ball to hit somebody's car. Fertilizer and pesticide, applied on a strict schedule to keep greens tournament quality, can run $100,000 a year on their own at a well-maintained course. Water alone can run a course in a dry climate 90 to 130 acre-feet a year, which is enough water for well over 100 households, consumed entirely by grass that produces zero income directly. And here's the number that looks safe and absolutely is not. A club can report 90% membership retention, a fully packed tee sheet, dues fully collected on time, and still be one bad year away from insolvency, because none of that touches the deposit liability sitting on the books. The real number that determines survival isn't how many members you have. It's how many new members are joining relative to how many are leaving and demanding their money back. That's the fragile part of the whole model. Equity and deposit clubs are structurally built on a constant inflow of new joiners to fund the refunds owed to the members walking out the door. Slow that inflow down for a few years, a recession, an aging membership, a bad economy for young professionals, and the club owes more money going out than it's got coming in, with 150 acres of grass still needing water either way, no matter what the balance sheet says about occupancy. Worth pausing on who actually designs the trap in the first place. A course architect named Robert Trent Jones shaped more private club layouts in America than almost anyone in history, and he built his reputation on a very specific idea that a course should be, in his words, a hard par and an easy bogey. That wasn't just a design philosophy, it was a business decision. A course punishing enough to humble a scratch golfer, but forgiving enough that a weekend player still walks off smiling, is a course members will pay dues on for decades instead of getting bored of in a single season. The difficulty itself is the retention strategy, built directly into the shape of the land, which is exactly the mechanism Robert Deadman built his empire on top of, and exactly the mechanism that, decades later, reshaped who owns American golf entirely. Deadman was a lawyer by training, not a golfer by trade, and he started with a single club in Dallas in 1957, spotting something the golf world hadn't priced correctly yet. He built that single club into Club Corp, eventually the largest owner of golf clubs and country clubs on earth. His food and beverage minimum wasn't just a quirky rule, it was a deliberate design choice, guaranteeing predictable cash flow every month, whether members actually showed up to eat or not, and it became the financial backbone of the modern private club industry. By the time Deadman passed away in 2002, Club Corp owned or operated well over 150 golf and country clubs across the country, a portfolio built almost entirely on dues, minimums, and the assumption that people would keep joining faster than they quit. In 2006, a private equity firm called KSL Capital Partners bought Club Corp for roughly $1.8 billion, taking on the company's clubs, its debt, and every one of those refundable member deposits along with it. Club Corp went public in 2013, trading on the New York Stock Exchange as a portfolio of golf courses and private clubs, reporting revenue north of $1 billion a year. Then in 2017, Apollo Global Management, one of the largest private equity firms in the world, bought the entire company again, this time in a deal valued north of $1 billion, including debt. Club Corp was later renamed Invited. The golf never stopped being played. The members never noticed a difference walking onto the first tee. But the ownership had changed hands between three different sets of financiers, none of whom were ever really in it for the greens fees, all of whom understood exactly what that monthly minimum and that membership pipeline were actually worth on paper. Which tells you who actually wins this game. It's rarely the person who buys one course and tries to run it like a passion project. It's firms like KSL and Apollo, who buy up dozens or hundreds of clubs at once and manage the debt and the dues like a portfolio, not a hobby, spreading the risk of any single club's bad year across an entire national roster of them. It's companies like Troon Golf, which doesn't own most of the courses it runs at all. It manages them for a fee, typically a flat management charge plus a small percentage of revenue, collecting that fee whether the course itself turns a profit or not, which means Troon gets paid even in the exact bad year that could sink an individual owner. And it's real estate developers, who were never really selling golf in the first place. More than 1,000 golf courses have closed across the United States since the mid-2000s, while only a few hundred new ones have opened to replace them. And yet the value of the land those courses sit on has often gone up the entire time, because somewhere along the way, the golf became the amenity and the houses became the business, and nobody selling those houses ever expected the course itself to turn a profit. So, what does actually owning one look like in a real year? In a good year, a well-run daily fee course pulling in $2 to $3 million in revenue might clear $200,000 to $400,000 in actual profit after maintenance, staff, water, and debt service. In a bad year, a drought that spikes the water bill, a recession that cuts rounds played by 20%, a wave of members demanding their deposits back all at once, that same course can lose $300,000 to $500,000, and the owner gets hit with what the industry politely calls a special assessment, an emergency bill sent to every remaining member just to keep the lights on. It's worth sitting with that for a second, a business that can swing $500,000 in either direction depending mostly on rainfall and interest rates, on 150 acres that look identical in both years. Smaller single-owner clubs have gone under on exactly this swing. Private clubs across the country have filed for bankruptcy protection, specifically because the deposit refunds owed to exiting members outran the dues coming in from new ones. The exact fragile mechanism sitting underneath the entire industry. The same math, just without a billion-dollar private equity firm standing behind it to absorb the year. What actually determines which year you get isn't how hard you work, or how good the course looks from the clubhouse window. It's the weather, the local economy, and how much debt was sitting on the course the day you bought it. The honest uncertainty here is real. Nobody, not the owner, not the bank, knows in advance which of those 2 years is coming, and the grass doesn't care either way. So here's what owning a golf course actually is. It was never really a business about golf. It's 150 acres of grass functioning as a very expensive marketing department for the houses next to it, propped up by a membership system that only works as long as new people keep walking in the door. You wanted your name on the sign. What you'd actually be buying is the water bill.